With budget talking, I think it's definitely important to dive right in. And after I understand the overall trip, that's where I'm really understanding how much money they want to spend. If they come back to me and say, Haley, we love 5 star, we want white glove service, we want the butler to open the doors for us, that changes my whole mindset going into the cost. Welcome to the Travel Agent Guide, the podcast pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to be a travel agent. We're talking real life, the challenges, the wins, the money, the mistakes, and the growth. Whether you've been in the travel industry for years or are new to it, we're in this together, and you're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah. All right. This episode is going to be amazing simply because it is the hurdle that travel agents struggle with most. And we are going to dive into budget, but we are not going to teach you how to ask for money. We're going to really help you sit there and work through a budget with your client. I think the worst case scenario is when a client says, how much does it cost to go to Italy? And you go, I don't know. I mean, we could do it for 8 grand. Like, that's not good. He who speaks first loses, and we're going to teach you how not to speak first. So this episode is really important. Even if you've been doing this in this industry for years and years and years, I hope that you learned something. I have a really unique strategy for stretching my client's budget that I'm going to talk about. And let's just face it and call it what it is. Americans hate talking about money. So we're going to help you feel a little bit more comfortable with that conversation. Haley, what's your favorite thing about talking about the budget with a client? Do you like this? Do you avoid it like the plague? Like, tell us a little bit about your feelings around that part of the conversation.
No, it's a conversation that has to be had. So at this point, I know it's part of my process. I have no choice. I will not get off a consultation without talking about budget. So and I'm very comfortable at this point. I lay it on the table. Some clients start fumbling, right? And I think that's normal. They don't know what to expect, but I'm pretty good at usually unfolding the layers and diving into it deep with them. By simply starting the conversation around budget, I think that's important. You get in and just say, do you guys have any type of, what are you looking to spend on this trip? Do you have a budget in mind, or have you a bottom line number right now is kind of how I started. Some people will be like, oh, well, we've done a little bit of research on this and that, and it kind of goes from there. Um, so that's kind of the starting point, right? Then I think it's important to really understand why your client's actually traveling. As you're discussing the price, is it their honeymoon? Is it a 40-year anniversary? Is it a family vacation? And just really understanding the actual trip so you can help not come up with the budget, because he who speaks first loses, right? You're basically making them understand what's going to be realistic and what's not at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us when you talk about budget, because you kind of mentioned a little bit of how you breach that subject, but is this early on? Do you have them fill out a form
No,
before they even get on a call with you? Tell
no.
me about that.
Yeah, my form doesn't have a budget on it because I have gotten so many intake forms where the budget is $1,000 to go to Italy per person. And then we get on a call and they're like, oh no, no, we knew it wasn't going to be $1,000. It's going to be, yeah, we're expecting to spend like 5 to 7 thousand per person, right? So if your intake form does have a budget on there and you're getting $500,000, please do not ignore that lead. Follow up with them, find out, is it a mistake, or the reality is they probably just don't know. So they're going to put whatever the bottom line is until you educate them. So that's my first advice there. In the consultation, I always dive into understanding what they want first before I ask them about budget. I think that's important so I can understand, are you a luxury traveler? Do you like 5 star properties? Are you more into the experiences, or do you want to spend a lot of time at the property? Are we diving into doing a spa? With budget talking, I think it's definitely important to dive right in. And after I understand the overall trip, that's where I'm really understanding how much money they want to spend. If they come back to me and say, Haley, we love 5 star, we want white glove service, we want the butler to open the doors for us, that changes my whole mindset going into the cost. typically at that point, if they're telling me this, the reality is they don't know the budget, neither do I. So I'm going to put together and they're not going to expect to even have a budget in mind, right? If I have a client who tells me, Haley, we don't mind staying in 3-star properties. Those aren't important to us. We'd rather put the time into, exploring the city or whatever that looks like. I think that's important where you really need to have the budget conversations and also explain I don't book 3-star properties for this reason. But basically that's where you
Also,
kind of
bless and
dive.
release.
Yeah, you kind of dive into, okay, how much money, like what was your understanding? I just had a consultation probably about 4 weeks ago with clients going to Italy, and I'm not kidding you. It was a referral from a client, honeymoon couple. They got on the call and we went over some details and then they're like, yeah, so we were thinking between like $5,000 and $7,000. And this was like 10 days to Italy with airfare included. And I sat there and I said, guys, like, thank you so much. Like, let me just explain to you kind of where we are with costs so you get a good understanding. Typically, let's look at flights right now. We're looking at about $1,800 per person. So that's already half of your budget.
Let's do the breakdown in a second. And I
Okay.
only say that because I think that that's a pretty deep dive.
Okay.
And I think this is the most common aggravation. Only because a lot of Americans don't go to Europe very often. So if you're going to the Caribbean, you probably don't get it as often as people are like, yeah, it costs 5 grand to go to Europe, right? And it's like in 2005 it did. Yes, that was correct. But
Yeah.
it feels very different now. But I love that you pointed out that that budget conversation is not something that you necessarily get on the call and dive right into.
Yeah.
Instead, it needs to be something where you understand their trip. You build trust with them, you get them on your side, you get them excited to work with you, then you can talk budget. Because if you start talking about it too early and you haven't built trust yet, when you push back on their budget, they're going to shut down. It
Yeah.
feels like an insult to tell somebody they don't have enough money to travel, right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you have built trust and taken the time. I'll tell you something that was really interesting is my other travel agency. We analyzed the website about 6 months ago, and it was really, really interesting because we were getting around 700 to 800 leads a month. We're typing in the form had first, last name, email, phone number, and then it just had a describe your trip box. It had a budget box, and then it had a submit button. So 800 leads were going in. We lost basically nobody at first name, right? That's how you start the count. Last name, nobody. Email, we lost. It was about 2%. Phone number, we ended up losing about 5%. The describe your trip was the box where we still had most followers and then the budget. The budget got us at the end of the day, we only ended up driving around 250 leads that month. And I was like, dang, we went from 800 leads to 250 because they didn't know what their budget was and they wanted the guidance, and that's what we do. So what we did was we took the budget off. We still saw a pretty big drop from first name, last name to describe your trip. We took that off, and what we did is had name, email, phone number, submit, and then we had a second page that said describe your trip, submit, and then they went to schedule their consultation with us. And this was really huge because it showed us that our clients weren't ready to talk about budget. They weren't sure. How many of you guys have gotten on a phone call and the client goes, well, I don't know, how much does it cost to go to France? Like I don't know about you, Haley, but I feel like I get that all the time. Like that was a normal conversation to have, right?
Very much so. Oh yeah. How much? Well, with your expertise, like what is it going to cost me to go?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
And that's the hardest one to wiggle out. So maybe we start there.
Hmm.
So step one, don't do the budget in the beginning. Step two, do the budget at the end, and what to do when they kind of hold you against a wall, basically. So we'll talk about like when they give you a budget and it's not good enough next, but if they hold you against a wall and they say, well, I've already told you about my trip. How much does it cost? How do you typically push back on them in kind of like that gentle manner? What does that look like for you?
First, I tell them, well, with your dates and what you're really looking for, I'm not going to know until I actually get in and start doing the research. So I have no idea. Right. And I think that's kind of how I put it out there. I do tell clients, I mean, my bottom line to really starting with a client is about 5 to 600 per person per day. just because of the logistics, the moving, the transfer, the full white glove service that we provide. And I do at times put that out there for clients, depending on the budget that they give back to me. And it really changes their mindset. And they're like, okay, I this is based off the information they give me in the actual consultation burn, right? So again, if it's like honeymooners, I know they're not spending tons of money. That conversation is going to be different than, a couple in their 60s who's retiree and they're doing this.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's a
so
big.
the how much does it cost per person is one that I love answering because it could be so dramatically different. And what I do is I always lean on, oh, I've spent 2 months in Europe and I spent less than 2 grand because I stayed in hostels the whole time, right? Like what it costs is a really hard question for me to answer because it could absolutely range. And then I explain to the client what I'd rather do here is I'd rather you tell me what you have in mind and what your gut reaction is because I never want to make you feel uncomfortable financially. You tell me what you're comfortable with, and I'll tell you what if what you just described fits into that or not. And that's where if they come back with, $3,000 or $5,000 for a 2 week trip to Italy, I can easily come back and be like, okay, but what you described to me was 4-star hotels and private excursions. That's going to be da 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 da. And you can kind of go from there. But you still got them to say a number first. I've had people where in my gut, I knew for a fact they were going to say, 5 grand for 2 weeks in Switzerland. And they came back and said 30. And I've had people I thought was going to say 30 and they came back and said 5 and I was like, I'm sorry, what? Have you had that fantastic client that spends 30, 40 grand and they give you a referral and you're like, it's going to be just as good. And they come back and they have no money.
I've even had that fantastic client who has spent 30 or 40, then comes back to me with a completely different budget of 15, right? So I think it's important to notate that just because the client does spend all that money on one big trip doesn't mean the next trip's going to be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the how much does it cost is basically you tell me what you're most comfortable with. What kind of
Mhm.
number do you have in your head? What I want to do is not make you feel uncomfortable. Tell me where you are, and I'll tell you if what you described fits that. If they say, I haven't done any research, you're the expert, I have no clue at all what this costs, I really need you to guide me. Where do you go from there, Haley?
Yeah, so I immediately start with what we're looking to plan. And I explain to them that I'm a full service travel advisor. So what that means is I'm going to take care of your flights, I'm going to take care of your hotels, your transfers, your trains, all the things and the experiences that you're looking for. So the number that you have in mind is that covering all those costs. So it's important to make sure that that number they told you, they weren't just expecting hotels. I've had clients who have been like, yeah, so hotels and this is 3,000. Then for tours, we'll spend like 2 grand. And they're like picking it apart from the beginning. So I just make sure I understand what their all in is, right?
Yeah.
Beside from food or whatever that looks like. Then from there, I basically set expectations. I'll go right to Google Flights and be like, okay, so we talked about flights. It's going to be $1,800 to get to Greece this summer per person. So we're already at half of the budget that you mentioned. And that's going to leave us with, $150 per person per day. That's not even enough for a hotel room for a night in Athens, right? And setting expectations along that line, they're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So I guess we're going to have to spend more money. And then we kind of go from there. And it's either, oh, we're going to need time to talk about this. Maybe we just don't have the money right now. Or, yeah, let's figure out what the costs are really going to be so we can go from there. Then I'll dive into typically, I always say between 5 and 600 per person per day is where is a good starting, but that's without flights, right? So it's kind of my general understanding if they truly don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I always push back at least one more time. I think one of my favorite things to explain to them is, okay, but let's take Italy or France or whatever the destination is completely out of the picture because you know your financial state. And if I give you a number and it doesn't match your financial state, this is going to be a more awkward conversation. What I think is most realistic is you telling me what you kind of have budgeted, regardless of where we go. Because if you say a number that's very unrealistic for this trip to Italy we've been talking about, maybe I could pivot and say, well, we can't do that, but we could do X. And
Mhm.
then we can have that conversation. So I really need to know where you are financially and where you're comfortable for. Because again, I think throwing out the $500 and $600, I mean, if they keep pushing and your back's against the wall, it is what it is. But I would say try to push back at least twice. And the reason that I'm saying that is because that second time has never once failed me. The second time where I say, take the country out of it, take the trip out of it, what do you have budgeted this year for travel? Like we have to have the conversation. I have to know. And when you kind of say, take the vacation out of it, what do you feel most comfortable with? I think people start to say, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess I do have to give her a number. The worst, though, do you have the clients that go, I don't have a budget? You have those guys? I
Then
don't
they
have a budget.
absolutely do have a budget because then when you,
1000%.
yeah, they do have a budget. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you do with I don't have a budget? Tell me about those guys.
Yeah. So in the past couple of years, I've changed it. I used to say, okay, no budget, fantastic. And then I realized quickly it's going to be a problem. And what I do is basically say, okay, so there's no budget. I mean, I tell them that I have done trips for this destination where people are spending 40,000 per person, right? Is that the type of trip that you're really looking for? Do you want me to go that above and beyond? And then all of a sudden you throw that number, it's going to change everything. Like, whoa, 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 40 grand? No, no, no. I maybe like 10,000 per person. Oh, okay. So you do have a budget. Let's go from there. Right. And I think getting them to turn around that conversation of, you need to really know to what you're going to build for them and the trip you're going to create. You need a number to get in there and understand it so you don't spend all the time going back and forth. I have lost clients who told me that they don't have a budget
Yeah,
because I
absolutely.
was not, I was just not transparent about it. And I'm like, okay, I'll look at this as a trip that I can sell and we're going to spend 40 grand. Granted, it was Italy and I felt like for 5 people, it was going to be close to that anyways with what they described. But it was a huge issue. And the client was extremely offended, ended up booking everything on their own. So it was a mistake that I learned kind of the hard way. So I think it is important to get that number from the client.
So one of my favorite things to say, I take a very similar approach of like, I plan trips for 100,000 plus dollars to this destination all the time. Is that what you're looking for? But the way that I phrase it is I explain, so you do understand my job, right? My job is actually to spend people's money. That's what I do for a living. And I need to tell you that when you tell me you have no budget, that I need to explain to you that I am really good at my job. So if you want me to spend your money and you want me to go crazy and all out over the top crazy yachts, private everything, I can do that. But I need to understand, is that what you're really looking for here? Or, I'm not really asking how much money is in your bank account. What I'm really asking is what you feel like you want to invest in this particular experience. And it's probably not $1 million, right? Is it? And then they always go, no, it's not. Like, absolutely
I
not.
love that. That is amazing.
But I love that moment of like being silly with the client because budget feels very heavy for people and
Mhm.
it feels very overwhelming. And again, Americans really, really hate to talk about it. So if you can find some levity and make jokes about spending their money and how good you are at it and how much fun you have. I love spending other people's money. How much money I got, right?
Yeah.
Like that makes people kind of giggle a little bit and it does help kind of alleviate where it is. We do have people we have to turn down every now and then. And really, at the end of the day, what you are explaining to them is they don't have enough money to work with you. That is what you're really explaining. However, I'd recommend you don't use those words. So, Haley, how do you tell someone they don't have enough money to work with you?
It's a hard one. There's my silence for a minute. It's definitely a hard one. I basically will just come back and tell them that with what they're describing to me, I feel like I'm going to let them down on my execution because I am going to fall short of the money of what they're looking for. And that's kind of how I explain it. I mean, depending on how unrealistic the budget is, I always say there could be a travel agent who could maybe do the trip cheaper than I and could really give them the 3 star. Every time I accommodated a client's 3 star property to get their budget, I heard so much crap about their hotels in Europe, right? I got a lot of negative feedback, and that's when I decided, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to stick with the properties I know best. I'm going to make sure my clients are taken care of. So I make sure the client just knows that, right? That unfortunately for this specific trip, I just don't think my business aligns with what you're looking for. And that's fine. I'm happy to see if I can find an advisor and refer you. If not, then I wish you all the best, right?
Oh, you're better than me. I do not refer out, but I do take a similar approach. I explain a little bit more to them because I want to educate them on what I'm looking for because just because they don't have that money doesn't mean their parents don't or their uncle doesn't. And I want them to leave with kind of a good taste about me in their mind at to be realistic. So I kind of explain like, look, there is an unlimited number of hotels in the world for me to get to know and explore. And it's really unrealistic for me to be an expert in everything. What I've decided to do with my career is I have decided to be the expert at five-star hotels in Europe. And then I also explore a handful of very, very trusted four-star hotels for clients that do need some flexibility in their budget. But I have to be honest, I know nothing and I do zero research about three, two, and three-star hotels. And the reality is, what you're asking for, while it's going to be an amazing trip, and I'm super excited for you guys, I am not the travel agent to book this trip. I really would not do a great job at this. So I'm going to recommend that you go elsewhere and find another agent that can work within that budget. But I will tell you this is an amazing trip. And then what I try to do is I try to give them like a little insight, like, just so you know, one of my favorite things to save money, instead of trying to take like a private transfer from the airport in Rome out to the rail station, did you know that there's the Leonardo Express? So it's a rail that you could take just from the airport. It'll take you right to the train station. You can hit the ground running. It'll be a great day. Whatever it is, whatever BS kind of thing that you can
Yeah.
think of to give them value in that moment. So if you have this is almost start pulling from like your knowledge of pre-departure. So if in pre-departure you would warn clients about something specific, whatever that looks like, it's a really good time to give value. So let them down, tell them, educate them on what it is you do, and then go ahead and give them some value on like, I'm not going to help you, but here's some things you should know and take into account if you're going to do this on your own. This is what you need to know. And I think that kind of helps ease the conversation. And it is a bit awkward. It's not like it's not, but helping them understand I'm an expert in five-star and I'm not going to be the best person makes it feel easier on both sides. And that way I'm also not saying like, you need more money. Okay, so we've worked with budgets a little bit when they won't give you one. We've worked with budgets when they don't have one. We've worked with budgets when it's not enough and kind of breaking down. I love Haley's approach of taking out the flights first and then kind of breaking it down per day. And that gives you a good idea of what it really is and shows them it's not enough money. But what we haven't done is talked about stretching a client's budget. Haley, do you have kind of a technique that you use to kind of understand, is 10 grand 10 grand? Or is 10 grand actually 15 if I show you the right thing? Like, how do I get them to come around to let's indulge, let's play?
I think in the budget conversation, having okay, so we're invested 10 grand. Thank you for that number. Now, if I come back and show you something just absolutely going to knock your socks off, what is your scare point? What is the highest amount of money that you're willing to really invest? Then, people can jump 5 grand all of a sudden, right? Like, okay, so if you're going to get me that private tour of sipping wine with the best views in Greece on the island, whatever, then okay, maybe we're willing to pay for that. And it can definitely change things. So I think that's one way to see if they do have more money. I always think too, while you're presenting your trip and you're in a proposal, again, Bert and I and our company does very hands-on Zoom approaches. So we're telling a story when we're proposing to a client. That for me is a great time to upsell, right? To come in and say, listen, I want to show you this one property. It's going to be X amount of more to the package price that I'm showing you, but this is why I want to show it to you. It's going to be prime location. It's giving you everything that you want and more. And there's a rooftop bar, whatever that looks like for you to put it there for the client to see. And you just basically explain to them, this is going to be $1,500 more or $2,000 more, they're probably going to go with it, right? When they see the side by side comparison and the different experience that they could possibly have. And same with the tour, right? Here's the shared tour, but if we upgrade to the private tour and you spend another $2,000, you have the chef who is drinking wine with you and cutting your truffles up that you just hunted or whatever that looks like, right? And it's how you depict it and how you tell the story to the clients where they're going to all of a sudden say, oh, that sounds amazing. And I don't want to pass it up.
Yeah, I definitely want to indulge. I
Yeah.
find that, so I also use the word scare point. I don't say the highest amount of money because I think that actually scares people. I say, like, what's the maximum investment we want to make in this experience? And I think that subtle twist might help people feel a little more confident in it. But I absolutely say, like, what's your scare point? What's the maximum investment here? But before I get to that, I always explain to them how I work. And I think part of that for me is really, really helping them understand that respect is huge for me. So I say, like, hey, I need you to know that I will always respect your budget. I am not going to be someone that's going to push you even a dime. If I am putting this package together and it comes in at, we're going to use $10,000 because it's easy, but if I'm putting this package together and it comes in at $10,000 and one penny, I'm going to cut something, like, period. I will never make you uncomfortable because the last thing I want is for you to be sitting in the airport, headed out to this beautiful experience, and your wife goes, hey, do you want that second glass of wine? And you're like, no, because we spent way too much on this trip already. Like, that's not a great experience for me. So I'm aggressive about respecting your budget. So I'm wanting to know, is 10,000 10,000? Or if I find something that's like this really special experience and it pushes us over a little bit, like, what does that look like for you? So what's kind of your maximum investment that we want to make in this particular trip? And I will come back with options targeting what we talked about. And then I'm going to come back with, if I were to indulge, this is where I would do it. So then you guys can make that educated decision yourself. What do you think? What's your scare point here? And they'll come back. And like Haley said, it is almost always a $5,000 difference. It's shocked. I had a lady one time, it still knocks my socks off because she went from 15 to 25. She ended up booking at 23.5. And I just, like, I will always remember this lady because I'm like, a $25,000 trip is dynamically different from start to finish than a $15,000 trip. And it was just an interesting concept to me because I was like, so 10 grand just does that. Those are the same numbers to you. Got it. Got it. We live in different worlds, right? 10 grand is not a different number, is a big number to me. But I thought that was really interesting. And I think if you take the extra moment and explain to them, I respect your budget. I will not push it. I'm only doing something you're comfortable with, and I'm still going to target your budget, but show you extras. You're going to get a lot more out of it. And Haley, chime in here. What, 9 out of 10 times they go with their scare point, they do the indulgence once they see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if not, it's completely fine, right? You still gave them that option and there's that. But I think at the end of the day, the clients want to see that you're educating them and showing them other options and not just saying, hey, this is what 10 grand gets you and that's it. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, dive in a little deeper and figure out how you can make the best of what you're putting together for your client.
I love everything about that. Has there ever been a time where a client truly made you uncomfortable talking about budget, really pushed you too far, anything like that that you want to kind of bring up? Hey, I learned X from this experience.
I think we could go back to that Italy one I mentioned shortly ago, where it was that I have no budget. And, I think what is important too, when you think a client has money off your conversation, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have money or vice versa, right? Or don't look at somebody and be like, oh, they must not have money.
Or it
It's,
doesn't mean that they're willing to spend it. I know a lot of people
yeah,
that have a lot of money and they will not spend their money. That's why they have a
yeah,
lot of money, is because they
right.
won't spend it.
Exactly. And they have a budget and that's what it is. And regardless of what they say, I think it's just important to have the conversations with the clients. For me, this one client, I pushed him. I used a astronomical number. He got extremely offended and I lost the sale. And I sat there and instead of being like, oh, well, F him, I didn't want to work with him anyways, I looked at it like a learning opportunity, right? What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? Maybe if I sat back and was very clear with him about this budget expectation and getting these numbers out of him, then it would have been much different, right? If I knew the budget wasn't going to line, I should have blessed and released in a professional manner instead of letting it get to this because I truly offended him off of throwing out this crazy number, right? So I
And I
think
want
it's
to add in there, like, whatever the budget is that they give you, you really do need to respect it. Like, I think it's really inappropriate when agents are like, just throw it out, even if it's a couple grand more. Like, they'll go for it. They may, but if you didn't ask permission for that, that's rude and it's not okay. And it's not a great way to build a relationship because they may go for it now, but they probably are going to think twice about using you again in the future because they're going to be like, well, I'm going to tell her 10 and she's going to spend 15 or even she's going to spend 12. Like it's a break of trust and I think it's really important to respect people when they do give you a budget. If you ask permission, that's a whole different ball game. Take the time and ask permission.
I think on that note, Bird, it's important as well in your consultation to make sure you're setting other expenses and expectations in mind for them, right? Like insurance is probably going to be 5% plus based off of what your package price is. That's not included in the budget you're giving me. Or if it is, then you need to take that into consideration because nothing's worse than when you come back to a client and then they're like, wait, insurance is going to cost me $2,000 because they're in their 60s and it's a lot. So definitely set those expectations and make it clear to them this is what we can kind of expect. Because you don't want to go in and be like, okay, so you have all these taxes on property. Here's your insurance. What else can we possibly add on? Because then they just look at it for a sales experience. I had a client once that she went to Napa Valley before Hawaii. So they spent like 4 or 5 days in Napa Valley. And I was setting up wine experiences for them. And I sat there and the feedback that I got, she kept saying, like, here was the website. We were looking at private wine tours. It was my understanding of what she wanted. When she came back, she said to me, she goes, I felt like Haley was just upselling me on private wine tours the whole time. And I'm like, okay, but so what did I do wrong, right? From that experience, I sat there and said, what, like, I guess I misread exactly what she was looking for, number one. Number two, all those effing wine tours were non-commissionable. So I made absolutely no money off of your wine tours at all. They were all booked direct. So I sat there and said, okay, how can I pivot in my sales approach and what am I doing differently? And maybe I didn't give her enough alternatives, right? Here's the share group versus the private. I just truly thought that's what she wanted. So, yeah, ask for feedback from your clients too, right? They'll give it to you, I promise.
I love that. I absolutely do. And I think those honest, candid conversations with clients make your relationships deeper and better at the end of the day. All right, key takeaways here are make sure to always ask for a budget and do not be the first to give up a number. If they will not give you a number, push back at least twice. That second pushback is absolutely going to get something out of them and it can at least start the conversation. I think one of the, when I listen to sales calls for our travel agents, one of the biggest mistakes I hear is they throw out a number and, if you throw out 15 grand because you thought that's what the client wanted to spend, but they had 10 in their head, well, now you've stressed them out because now they have to find 5 grand. But if you throw out 15 grand and they had 20 in their head, well, now you just lost on 5 grand commission. So it's not a game you win. Let them speak first. So biggest takeaway is ask for the budget and make sure that they speak first. Make sure to push back at least twice. Make sure to ask for a scare point so you know kind of the range that you can play in. And then last but not least, respect it when they give it to you. If they've given you a hard stop, please make a hard stop. We don't want to lose respect in our industry. It's already very hard earned as it is. So respect the client. Haley, any other last thoughts here about budgets?
No, just get comfortable talking about it. Don't be afraid to talk about money. It's part of the industry, it's part of our job. Do it.
One of the things I want to mention as we wrap up here is Haley does personal one-on-one coaching. She is incredible at what she does. I've got literally a laundry list of advisors who have worked with her, given her amazing feedback. This is something that we absolutely work on. So we will listen to your sales calls, either if you're on the phone or if you're on Zoom, whatever it is. We'll listen to your sales calls. We'll tell you exactly where you went wrong, what you need to ask, where you need to push harder, where you need to push softer. and help you understand what it is that's not working in your business and why you're not closing the sale. We also help you just talk about different ways to get more business and strategize and hold you accountable. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please email Haley@savatravel.com. All right, guys, until next week, we will talk to you very soon.
Bye. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Travel Agent Guide podcast. If you got value from today's conversation, do me a favor, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another travel advisor. Your support helps us reach more advisors and continue growing this amazing community. Don't forget to join our Facebook group, The Travel Agent Guide. And until next Wednesday, keep taking action, keep growing, and keep chasing those big goals. See you in the next episode.